As kids, everyone believed families were safe havens. But growing up, I realized that might not be the case for everyone, especially not for me. Our small suburban house was always filled with laughter and chatter, but not always the good kind. Our living room was a cozy space with mismatched cushions, a worn-out rug, and walls covered with photos, mostly of Clara. Clara with a trophy, Clara on her first day of school, Clara in her dance costume. There were some of me, of course, mostly hidden behind the vase, or partly obscured by another brighter, shinier photo of Clara. One afternoon, as I was rearranging the living room, Mrs. Henderson, our next-door neighbor and my mother's longtime friend, came over. A warm aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air, her standard visiting treat. "Margaret," she greeted, enveloping my mother in a hug. "How are the girls?" Before my mother could reply, I stepped forward, offering a tray of lemonade. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson?" She looked up, a little surprised, as if noticing me for the first time. "Oh, Evelyn, my, you've grown!" "Just a little," I responded, attempting a smile. My mother chimed in. "Wait till you see Clara. She's become quite the young lady." On cue, Clara danced into the room, her blonde hair bouncing with every step. "Auntie Jen." She wrapped Mrs. Henderson in a tight hug. Mrs. Henderson chuckled, holding Clara at arm's length. "Look at you! Margaret wasn't kidding. You're blossoming so beautifully." Clara beamed, twirling for effect. The conversation flowed easily after that, Clara narrating her recent school achievements and dance recitals. At some point, I tried to join the conversation, mentioning a recent school project. My mother brushed it off. "That's nice, dear," and immediately redirected the topic back to Clara's accomplishments. I could feel a familiar sinking feeling in my chest, the need to be seen, to be recognized. As the afternoon sun streamed into the room, casting shadows, I overheard my mother's soft voice. Evelyn was just a test case for Clara. Mrs. Henderson frowned. "Margaret, that's a harsh thing to say. They're both your daughters." Clara looked between the two adults, confusion clouding her bright eyes. "I just mean," my mother tried to explain, "that with Clara, everything was easier. She was planned." I felt a lump forming in my throat, the weight of being the unplanned child pressing down on me. Mrs. Henderson, sensing the tension, tried to lighten the mood. "Both your girls are special, Margaret. Don't forget that." Clara piped up, her innocence shining through. "Mommy, does this mean you love me more than Evie?" My mother hesitated, then replied with a gentle squeeze on Clara's hand. "Both of you are loved. Just differently." Hearing those words, I retreated to my room. The sting of their implications burrowed deep, forming scars that would last a lifetime. Juggling between university lectures and 2 part-time jobs was not how most people envisioned their college experience. For me, every morning began at dawn, serving customers at the local cafe, filling them up with their morning dose of caffeine. Afternoons were all about classes and group projects, and by evening, I was surrounded by a sea of books at the local bookstore where I worked the second shift. I'd often come home late, exhausted, only to find Clara lounging in the living room, engrossed in one of her new hobbies, her art supplies strewn everywhere. Our family dynamics had always been clear. Clara was the star, and I was the backdrop. One evening, as we all gathered around the dinner table, a rare occurrence with our conflicting schedules, I mustered the courage to discuss a decision I had been contemplating for weeks. "Mom, Dad, I've been thinking about renting a place closer to the university," I began hesitantly, eyes darting between my parents and Clara. My statement was met with stunned silence. Then Dad's chuckle broke the quiet. "Renting? On a barista's and a bookstore clerk's wage?" Clara snickered. "Planning on living in a cardboard box, are we?" Ignoring her jibe, I turned to Mom, hoping for some support. "I've saved up, and with careful budgeting, I think I can manage." Mom put down her fork, her expression skeptical. "Evie, you're barely managing to pay us for staying here. Do you think landlords will be as forgiving as we are?" "It's not about what's easy," I responded, my voice quivering slightly. "It's about learning to stand on my own feet." Clara leaned in, smirking. Big words for someone who's been leaning on us all her life. Fed up, I retorted, Maybe it's time you learned a thing or two about hard work and responsibility, Clara. She rolled her eyes, clearly uninterested in my lecture, while Mom interjected, "Girls, enough. Evie, we just don't want to see you struggle unnecessarily." "I appreciate that, Mom," I replied softly, "but sometimes struggle is necessary for growth." The days that followed were filled with whispered conversations behind closed doors and Clara's occasional jabs. Yet, my resolve remained unwavering. A week later, with bags packed, I moved into a modest, slightly worn-out studio apartment near my university. The independence was both daunting and exhilarating. While the family home, with its comfort and familiarity, was just a few blocks away, the emotional distance felt like miles. It was clear that my decision had not only changed my living situation, but also redefined my relationship with my family. The distant city lights shimmered through the curtains of my apartment, their soft glow contrasting the dark room. Engrossed in a particularly demanding case file, I was carefully making notes when my phone's unexpected ringing snapped me out of my concentration. I saw Clara's name on the screen and felt a pang of unease. Our last interaction had been months ago, and it hadn't been pleasant. Taking a deep breath, I swiped to answer. "Clara?" There was a pause, so unusual for my normally outspoken sister. Then, with an icy detachment, she said, "Dad's gone." For a moment, the words didn't register. "What do you mean, gone?" I stammered. She exhaled loudly. "Heart attack. It was unexpected. The doctors did everything, but—" I could feel a weight pressing on my chest. "I can't believe it. How's Mom?" Clara's tone, cold and almost businesslike, gave away no emotion. Distraught, as you can imagine. She's not speaking, not eating, just sitting there in the living room, staring at his favorite chair. I tried to visualize the scene, our childhood home filled with sorrow. The house which had seen so many memories, so many highs and lows, and now this. "And what about you?" I asked, trying to gauge her emotions. "How are you handling it?" There was a brief moment of vulnerability in her voice. "I'm coping, but this isn't about me." Before I could ask her what she meant, Clara launched into her main agenda. "Listen, I've got commitments, a busy work schedule, and my social life. I can't be there all the time. You need to come home and take care of things. And more importantly, Mom." The audacity of her demand infuriated me. "She's our mother, Clara, not a responsibility to be tossed around because you're too busy with your commitments." Clara hissed back. "You've always loved playing the responsible older sister, haven't you? Here's your chance. I've been there for them while you were busy building your career. Now, it's your turn." Every fiber of my being wanted to lash out at her selfishness, but I paused. Now was not the time for sibling rivalry. "All right," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll come home, but not because you ordered me to. Mom needs support, and I'll be there for her." She responded with a sarcastic cheerfulness. "Perfect. Glad you're seeing sense. Come quickly, won't you?" The line went dead, and I sat there, reeling. The loss of my father and the task ahead weighed heavily on me, but I was determined to step up. For Mom's sake, coming back home was like stepping into a different world. The once warm and lively house now felt cold and empty. Though I'd prepared myself mentally, nothing could have truly readied me for the stark change. Mom, usually the backbone of our family, looked frail and diminished. Her once sparkling eyes were now dull with grief. She barely acknowledged my arrival, lost in her own world of pain. But Clara, on the other hand, was as vocal as ever. "You finally decided to grace us with your presence," Clara remarked, her voice dripping with sarcasm as I entered the living room. Ignoring her jibe, I approached Mom, gently touching her arm. "Mom, I'm here now. We'll get through this together." She just nodded, her gaze distant. That evening, as I prepared dinner, I could hear Clara and Mom conversing in hushed tones in the adjacent room. Words like selfish, irresponsible, and career reached my ears. While I couldn't make out the entirety of the conversation, the undertones were clear. My absence during the past few years was a prime topic of discussion. At the dinner table, the atmosphere was tense. Every bite, every sip was filled with unspoken grievances. I mustered the courage to break the silence. "Mom, I know I haven't been around as much as I should have, but I'm here now, and I promise to be here for you." Mom, taking a deep breath, replied, "Evelyn, it's not about now. It's about all those years when you chose your work over us. I needed you then, and Clara was the one who was always by my side." Clara, smirking, added, "Some of us chose family over ambition." Stung by the accusations, I retorted, "I worked hard to provide for myself, to ensure I didn't burden you or Dad, and every time I offered help, it was declined. What did you expect me to do?" Clara scoffed, "Oh, please, play the victim somewhere else." The night wore on with heightened emotions and bitter words. The gap between the world I had built and the home I left behind had never felt wider. As I lay in my old bedroom that night, the weight of their expectations and the sting of their accusations weighed heavily on my heart. Returning home was proving to be more challenging than I'd anticipated. I had always been the dutiful daughter, the one who stepped up when others stepped back. From the moment I moved back into my parents' house, I took on the role of caregiver for my ailing mother. It wasn't an easy job, but it was the right thing to do. But no matter how much effort I put into making things comfortable for her, nothing ever seemed right. Every morning, I would make her favorite breakfast and try to engage her in conversation. But the response was always the same, a muttered complaint about the eggs being too runny or the toast too burnt. I would bite my tongue and nod, promising to do better next time. One evening, as I was cleaning the dishes, I overheard my mother speaking with Clara on the phone. "She just can't do anything right. I don't know why she even bothers." My mother's voice dripped with disdain. Clara, instead of defending me or even staying neutral, added fuel to the fire. "I told you, she's always been this way. You should have just let me handle things." It was heart-wrenching. Here I was, trying my absolute best, sacrificing my personal space, time, and mental well-being, only to be talked about like I was some kind of inconvenience. The whispers and gossiping became a regular occurrence, and every day it wore me down a little more. One particularly grueling day at work, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Clara's name flashed on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered, expecting another laundry list of things I had supposedly done wrong. In a tone colder than I'd ever heard, she snapped, "You need to leave. Mom can't stand you being there. You're making everything worse." My heart raced, and for a moment, I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. But then, a spark of anger and defiance ignited within. I was tired of always being the problem, the scapegoat. I responded, my voice firm, "Fine, I'll leave. But I'm taking my things with me." There was a pause, and I could imagine Clara's smug expression shifting to one of surprise. She probably expected me to beg, to apologize, to promise to be better. But those days were over. I was done being the family's invisible, taken-for-granted workhorse. The line went dead, and I took a moment to let it all sink in. It was time to reclaim my life and stop letting others define my worth. The morning sun broke through the blinds, casting warm rays over the living room. It illuminated the flat-screen TV, the couch, and the dining table, all reminders of years of hard work and sacrifice. Today, they became symbols of liberation. I methodically went from room to room. In the kitchen, I unplugged the fridge and microwave, each one a testament to those months I'd skipped outings with friends to save up. There was the coffee machine, my solace on many groggy mornings. The house echoed with memories, some sweet, some bitter, but the bitterness had started to overshadow everything else. My bedroom was next. I remembered buying the bed, picking out the sheets, arranging and rearranging the furniture until everything felt just right. I glanced at the vanity, a gift from my grandmother. It would stay. It wasn't about value, but principle. Just as I was taping up the last box, my phone buzzed to life, breaking the thick silence of the room. I knew who it was even before I checked. Clara's tone had been all sweet talk lately, but the underlying hostility was hard to miss. "You absolute thief!" The venom in her voice was palpable. Calmly, I replied, "Clara, everything I'm taking was bought with my money. I thought you'd be glad to see them go." "You can't just take everything from our family home," she shot back, her voice shrill. I sighed. It's funny how these things suddenly became family items. When I needed some support or a thank you, they were just things. Now that I'm reclaiming them, they're family heirlooms? I could practically see Clara's face turning red with fury. You're ruining everything just because of your stupid ego. I laughed, a sound filled with irony and bitterness. Ego? Clara, if this was about ego, I would have left ages ago. This is about respect, value, and standing up for myself. A scoff came through the line. Always the martyr, huh? Just return everything and maybe we can talk. Let's be clear. I have receipts for all these items, proof that they're mine. Every dime, every cent went from my pocket. Maybe you should have thought about that before you pushed me away. My voice was steady, but the rage and hurt underpinning it was undeniable. A heavy pause settled between us, thick with unsaid words and emotions. Finally, Clara hissed, "You always have to have the last word, don't you?" "It's not about having the last word," I replied, feeling the weight of years of suppressed feelings pressing down on me. "It's about finally speaking up." With that, I hung up, cutting off any further arguments. The boxes were loaded, the past was behind, and a future, uncertain yet hopeful, awaited. Months had passed since I severed ties with my family, and in that time, I blossomed. My confidence grew stronger each day, and I carved out a life for myself where I was in control and unyielding. My phone remained silent, my family's number blocked, and for the first time in years, I felt true freedom. The next time I saw my family was at my mother's funeral. Dressed in black, I stood apart, an outsider looking in, watching the play of my own family's drama. The air was thick with tension and unsaid words. Everyone seemed to be moving in slow motion, their faces a blur, their words just background noise. The reading of the will was held in the family attorney's chamber. Even though I had no interest in the inheritance, the town's gossip mill ensured I was well informed. Clara was, predictably, the sole beneficiary of everything. But what neither of us had anticipated was the mountain of debt our parents had left behind. The house, with its memories both bitter and sweet, was quickly sold. But even its sale didn't dent the colossal debt that loomed. I watched Clara's face turn from smug satisfaction to pale horror as the attorney listed out every debt, every mortgage, every unpaid bill. I caught snippets of hushed conversations between relatives. Bankruptcy? How did it come to this? Poor Clara, their voices dripping with a mix of pity and schadenfreude. While I felt a pang for the old house, I couldn't deny the grim satisfaction that welled up in me as I saw Clara grappling with this unexpected turn of events. For years, she had reveled in the security and comfort our parents provided, while belittling my every effort to stand on my own. Now, the tables had turned, and life had handed her its own brand of poetic justice. I left the funeral and the reading of the will without a backward glance. The whispers of the town didn't matter, nor did Clara's newfound troubles. I had my life, built brick by brick on my own terms, and nothing was going to shake that foundation. 2 years had swiftly passed since I'd separated from my family. The small apartment I'd initially settled into became too confining as my professional life flourished. Every day, I would catch glimpses of luxurious homes in magazines or on my way to work, and I couldn't help but think about buying my own. With my growing earnings, the idea seemed less of a dream and more of a tangible goal. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I was mindlessly scrolling through my social media when a familiar name popped up on my feed. There was Clara, surrounded by boxes and looking frazzled in front of our old family home. The caption read, "New Beginnings." A couple of mutual friends had commented words of sympathy. It didn't take much digging to figure out she had drowned herself in debt and was forced to put the house up for sale. I was midway through a call with my realtor about a lovely little house in the suburbs when my phone beeped with an incoming call. Clara's name flashed on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Hello?" "Long time," Clara's voice came through, laden with fake cheer. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I asked, wary. "I need your help," she began. A heavy pause. "I need money." I raised an eyebrow. "We haven't spoken in years, and the first thing you ask for is money?" "We're sisters," she exclaimed, frustration evident. "That didn't seem to matter when you kicked me out," I remarked coldly. I wouldn't be asking if I had another option, she snapped. The house needs to be sold, and no one's buying. I'm drowning here. A silence stretched between us. My thoughts raced. I'm not giving you money, I finally said, voice unwavering. But I'll offer you a deal. Clara exhaled audibly, waiting. I'll buy the house, but not at market price, at the minimum you owe. Take it or leave it. Her response was a soft, defeated, fine. The following weeks were a blur of paperwork, bank visits, and meetings. The day I received the keys to my childhood home was bittersweet. There was no triumphant return or a celebration, just a silent acknowledgement of all that had transpired. The house, once a symbol of fractured relationships and painful memories, now stood as a testament to my resilience and determination. As I set about making it my own, memories of the past were replaced by plans for the future. There were no more calls or messages from Clara. Our paths had diverged, and perhaps it was for the best. In the ancestral house, now mine, I built my sanctuary. The echoes of laughter and love soon filled its hallways, drowning out the whispers of the past. Forging ahead, my way, on my terms.